Welcome. We are doing close reading today, in which you are going to learn the way to annotate and what that all of the high school is, and you will use not just in English class, but also in science, history, math, CTE, and anything else you can think of. All right, as you see on your lovely colorful piece of paper in front of you, the step one is called previewing, and what that means is you read the title and subtitles, you examine the author, you examine illustrations. You can also examine the print if it's bold and differently formatted. You are able to see what's different. At the same time, you also need to number and chunk the text. So when you see your document, we have multiple paragraphs going on here. So we're going to go through, and for the first little bit, I'm going to number, and then you're going to make a decision about the later paragraphs. So this is our first paragraph, because this one with the italics is obviously showing us it's something different and not related to what we're reading. Okay? So I have paragraph 1, paragraph 2, and then you may continue on what you think is linked together. I'll leave it here. As I'm sure you're able to notice, this is where you get to see how long the article is, which we all die to know, and how many pictures and how much text we actually have to read. This also lets you kind of get an idea of what you're going to be reading about and predict and kind of see what the topic is going to be. One skill to think about while you are doing this is to guess what you might be learning about and how it links to what you have been. So for instance, this is about technology. So maybe you are in a computer class, or you are and been learning about screen time and what that means. You might read about lahars if you're learning about volcanoes and earth science. I know that lots of us love to ask why we have to do something. Like I was saying earlier, when you're scanning through this and skimming through, you can notice different types of fonts. And that's usually important information. If it's bolded or underlined, that might be a word you need to know to make sense of what you're going to be reading. And also, you need to generate on your own why something might be important to you as a learner. This is not meant to be reading every word verbatim. This is meant to be fast and quick. On your next step is step 2. That is what we call the first reading. This is where you actually read the text. You put question marks where things are confusing or needs clarification. The left margin is what we call our learning side. So left and L is learning, which makes it easy to remember. You write about statements. I personally call this my indexing side, where I put little summaries about what is in the text so that when I'm coming back later, it'll be quicker for me to reference, and I don't have to read word for word again. Each of your chunks, your paragraph numbering, all that type of stuff, this is a chance to check that. Maybe you numbered paragraphs as different numbers, and you see that dialogue is actually dialogue, so it should all go together because it's a conversation. It is okay to change things if you need to as you're going through this process. You need to also make sense and see if things are contrasting. If they are in sequence or order, that might actually mean you might need to change your number. So we can switch. So on the first paragraph of this, my number 1, I would read this. Screen right now, take a look around on a bus, in a cafe, even at a stoplight. Chances are most of the people in your line of sight are staring at their phones or other devices, and if they don't happen to have one out, it is certainly tucked away in a pocket or a bag. So what might be an option, and we could summarize this very short, that we could write on the left side?
Screens are omnipresent.
What's omnipresent mean?
Everywhere.
So, all right, so we can say, because for me, omnipresent is not my working vocabulary, I'm going to put screens everywhere.
I put everyone.
Screens everywhere and everyone? We can do that. And I'm putting it up here because I write giant on the screen. Is there any language in here that we are unfamiliar with that we need to circle? I might circle line of sight because that's kind of an idiom that might not be comfortable for everybody. If you're not sure, line of sight means it is visually able without me really moving. So if you have not already started to, please go through the other paragraphs and do what we just did here. Some other little notes to think about when you are doing this step is asking yourself, how does this relate to what we're learning? How does it relate to the rest of the article? Make your own index as you're doing this on the left side. Make sure it matches up to kind of what has already been going on. If you are, luckily today we have a piece of paper in which we can write all over and manipulate it however we'd like, but you will not always have that opportunity. You might have a textbook, you might be online, you might be taking a blended class. If you are in that situation or taking the AZM2, as they're calling that, AZ Merit now, you could split your paper in half into your left side activities on the left side of the column, and on the right side of your column have the right side activities that we're going to talk about in a second. So then you leave space so that you can, like the paragraph differences, so that you can still take your notes and make your comments as needed. I will say that I use this technique a lot to help make my writing when I'm writing about text much quicker and more efficient for myself. If you need to go back and reread things, this is probably the best time to do so with this step also. Our step 3, as you can see once again on your notes, underline the details that are support about statements, which is what I call my indexing, another teacher will call about statements. Exclamation marks where there are important ideas in the text. You star your main ideas, so thesis statements should be frequently starred. And C's for any connections you find. In conjunction with the C, personally, I know Miss Peterson's another one who likes to draw arrows instead of writing C's to what she connects to in the text. If I write a personal response connection, I will sometimes use a C or a circle, a little dot that's different so that it's obvious, not a note, just something that made me think. On our right margin, this is the right side, so we're using the word reflection to help for like a memory aid. On your right side, you have reflections. You make your predictions. You have your opinions are in this part. This is where you can do some of your higher level analysis and looking for your patterns and your repetition. When you are in English class, this is also kind of what would lead to your dot point summary. I'm sure most of you have heard of at this point or will be hearing about if you have not. And that's about it. So on our example, we can then put some stuff on the right side. So there is an image, so I'm going to have to write way over. So looking up from this screen right now, take a look around on a bus in a cafe. I would probably have a connection about the bus because when I was in college, everybody was on their phones, right? If you think of if you go to a college, you see all the kids on the buses. They're always on their phones. They're always doing something along those lines. For something important, I would feel that what do you guys think I will adjust that. What do you believe is the main idea in that sentence that we should underline? Yes?
Most of the other people in your line of sight are staring at their phones or other devices.
So should we underline or exclamation point?
I underlined because that's what I do with main ideas in the sentence, and then I also started because that's what we're supposed to do with the main idea.
And then the exclamation point. Yeah. And the exclamation point would be another secondary main point. Do we need an exclamation point? Yep. So I'll let you continue on. And, all right, so some extra information about this one is that this is checking your understanding of the reading. Do you understand what's being said, what you're supposed to have learned? You are putting this in your own words so that you understand it better, to summarize. Once again, if you are on an online class or with textbooks or working with a computer where you're trying to read what is going on, This would be where your right side notes would go. This would be your analysis, your personal reflection. You need to try, and when you're doing the written notes, to keep kind of your personal thoughts put away, because that's going to eat up a lot of your note space. So make sure you include your analysis, and make sure it matches the left side of your notes. And also, as you're writing this, make sure this matches up with your left side. Your analysis goes with what you have said this is a summary or index for. Continually check yourself that you're being accurate and that this is making your life easier in the long run. In our fourth step, this is what you are going to be doing for the job that you've been assigned. So in an English class, I might ask you to generate a thesis from this regarding if technology should be banned in schools. Or if you're in a different class, maybe they are asking you to explain the process of creating a trebuchet if you're in construction. But this is where your job is. So you've already read it. You already know what it's about. So as you look at your assignment, you can then just go back and find your answers within your little index and your summaries, and you can use your own analysis and your responses to then be very quick in your writing response. Make sure in that instance that you're being thorough and using complete sentences. We'll get to in a second. So for our practice purposes, I'm going to say generate a thesis, as I said, about if we should ban cell phones from classrooms based off of this little bit of information that you have. And then you may share it with a neighbor when you're done. And as I was saying earlier, when you're doing your writing, we would like you to do we would like you to do these in a complete sentence. And this is the simplest way to explain complete sentence. This is the bare minimum, and we hope that you will expound in English class and learn to have more in-depth sentences. But step one is capitalize the first letter of the sentence, capitalize I, capitalize proper nouns, which means names, places, or things that is their name. Add end punctuation, a period, exclamation point, singular, one exclamation point, and a question mark. Once again, singular question mark. And write in a complete sentence so that as you read it aloud, it sounds like someone is speaking. In addition to that, those three simple things which make a complete sentence, you also need to then add in a because or proving or some evidence as to why you think that. So within your thesis, some of you may have done it already. You might want to check it and say that I believe that we should use cell phones in class because it helps, even though this article says it does not. Or you may have said, yes, we should ban cell phones because it is detrimental to our learning. Check and make sure you have a because statement at this time. If you do not, fix it so that you do. If you have used a because statement, did you use academic language? You did not say, bruh, nah, that is not academic language. You used, no, I do not think we should do this, and pull some language from the article that is appropriately to use. You read it aloud to yourself. Yeah, this sounds great. I use proper language. I sound very smart. I sound very academic and intellectual.
I'm going to talk about how the close reading has been adjusted for the math classrooms. This might give you an idea of how you can take this same idea and make minor adjustments to make it work in your content area. So usually in the math classroom, we're using this for a word problem. So we don't need to do step one, preview. There's not a lot to preview in a word problem. It's a short chunk of text. So we go into first reading, read the text independently. This is to give the students an idea of what it is they're going to be dealing with. For example, Keith spent half of his allowance going to the movies. He washed the family car and earned $9. What is his weekly allowance if he ended with $16? Okay, Keith's got some money, he's spending money, earning money. What's his allowance? Second reading, we're reading back through carefully now to annotate this. With English, with the ELA close reading, they're underlining details supporting statements. For us, we're underlining symbols or numbers that might then become a mathematical equation or an algebraic expression. We then take those and write the words as symbols. So we're starting to translate this into math speak. And then instead of starring a main idea, we're starring the quantity or quantities that are being asked for. Students so often miss the actual instruction. They think they know what they're being asked for and they solve for something totally different. By starring this, we're trying to focus them in on what they're asked for. So with the example for Keith, I'm looking through this, underlining symbols or words, and I like to point out to the students that sometimes they're hidden. Keith spent. Spent means gave away, got rid of. That's a mathematical word. That's hiding subtraction in there. Half. It's not written out as a number, but half is a number. Spent half of his allowance going to the movies. He washed the family car and earned, that's hiding another mathematical operation. He's getting more money, earned $9. What is his weekly allowance if he ended total, ultimate answer, $16. So I've underlined words that may become symbols. So then, writing any of these symbols, he spent, he gave away, subtracted half of his allowance. He washed the family car and earned, added to his money, $9. Ended with, ultimate end result is equals $16. And then what are we being asked for? What is his weekly allowance? From there, we use the annotations to write the expression or equation. So I tell my students, we're being asked for the allowance. This is what we don't know. He has an allowance unknown variable. He spent half minus half of allowance. He washed the family car and earned $9 plus $9. What is his weekly allowance if he ended with $16? And now they have an equation they can solve. So step 4, they do go ahead and solve that. I won't bother going through that here. Punchline is A equals 14. And then step 5, check that your answer or answers match what you were asked for, match that starred quantity, and label with units. I was asked for Keith's weekly allowance. I found A allowance. This is good. 14. No units. Now I'm good with units. $14. Now when we go over to writing, this is not very different from how ELA has presented it. Full sentences, capitalize, use punctuation. We don't often need exclamation points or question marks in math answers, so I just made that period. Write your answer in a full sentence. Make sure it contains a complete thought. I did change the wording here for our content. Instead of add support or evidence, I said justify your answer, because in math exams, typically the testing vocabulary says justify, so that's reflecting our testing vocabulary. And read your answer aloud quietly. So this would then maybe turn into Keith's, capital letter, weekly allowance is $14, and in this problem there is no need to justify. So that's how we adjusted this for math. Hopefully that helps see how you can take the same ideas and use it for your own content.